Welcome back to Data Protection Diaries, welcome back to the vlog. It's been a little while. I know I seem to say that at the beginning of every video, but it has again been a little while, so my apologies if you've been waiting for some content and some update from me. In today's video we're going to be looking at the risk, the kind of continuing risk out in the market of staff having access to individuals' records and staff accessing information within organisations that they shouldn't necessarily be accessing. So this has been driven by a particular case in a South Warwickshire NHS trust, and of course somebody within that organisation has managed to access patient records. It is probably more common than you think it is, but it is something that does need to be addressed. So we're going to look at what the risk is, what the issue is, but more importantly, 3 things that you can implement within your organisation to protect your systems, your data and your customer information. New to the channel, then welcome aboard. Please do make sure that you subscribe if you aren't already. There is a little logo in the bottom right hand corner. If you click on that, you'll be able to subscribe to the diaries. Of course, if you're not new to the channel, then welcome back. It's great to see you again. Please do make sure that you like this video, comment your thoughts down below. Have you been in an organisation where there is free access to information? Have you been subject to any kind of risk where somebody may have accessed your information when they shouldn't have been? What are your experiences and what are your thoughts on this particular phenomenon? For now, let's get on with what we want to talk about today. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the reason for this particular episode is down to a recent case in a South Warwickshire NHS trust, so within a hospital where an individual accessed patient records when they weren't supposed to. So just to make sure I get the facts correct, in this particular case, the individual whose name I'm not going to use, although that information is in the public domain, was working at the South Warwickshire NHS Foundation Trust back in 2019. They unlawfully accessed the records of 14 patients who were personally known to the individual, and they did so without a valid reason or a valid business reason and without the knowledge of the trust. The individual was taken to court, pleaded guilty in court, was ordered to pay £250 compensation to 12 patients, totaling £3,000 in total. The first thing here for me is the level of the impact of the fine. Now, £250 for per person doesn't necessarily feel like a great deal, doesn't feel like a great charge, but at least it's gone against 12 different people, so it's amounting more like £3,000. Obviously that's £250 for each of them by way of compensation, so there is at least something there. The big issue here really, and it's something that's been around for a long time, certainly for as long as I've been working in data protection, is the accessing of records by individuals. So individuals that work within hospitals, individuals that work within police departments, any kind of sector where information may be of interest, I suppose is the best way to describe it, where somebody wants to know something about somebody they know, wants to get some information about an individual, be it a neighbour, a family member, an ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, ex-partner. The big risk here is, of course, that this information has been collected for a particular purpose, it's been collected for a particular reason. Just because you work within that organisation does not mean that you have a right to access that information. Information should always, of course, remain private. It should be used primarily for the purposes which it was collected, but more importantly, people should only be accessing the information which is pertinent and relevant to their job role. The other really important thing to remember here is that while the individual is at fault, so while the individual can of course be prosecuted and can be challenged for their actions, it can also lie with the controller. The problem lies with the controlling organisation. Did the organisation provide appropriate training? Have you done enough to deter these kind of things from happening? What controls have you got in place in the first place to mean that this can't even be an issue, or to stop this from even being an issue? It's very easy to err on the side that the individual shouldn't have done that. It's their own fault. They know what their job role is, they know what they can have access to. But it's also very, very important that there are controls and processes in place to protect your organisation from this kind of thing happening. So what are those things? What can you do to keep your organisation safe? Well, let's take a look at the top 3 things that you might want to consider putting in place within your organisation to kind of reduce this risk of individuals accessing information inappropriately. So number 1, the first thing is probably the most obvious and the most clear. It is making sure that you have appropriate training in place within your organisation and within your teams. Now, this training may be tailored, and I would always recommend that it is tailored to different departments, different individuals who have access to different records to enable them to do their jobs. But it should be there, it should be done within inductions, it should be done on a regular basis. I'm never a big fan on the kind of annual training thing where everybody does the annual training course and then they fill in the questions at the end. I'm more interested in general awareness, continual awareness, pushing information out on a regular basis, reminding people of what their responsibilities are, reminding people of what they can and can't do, and how information should be accessed and used is far more beneficial than just having an annual training program or just having a test at the end. But that training, that understanding, it's important for the people within the business. They then can't say that they didn't know. It's also important for your accountability. So if something goes wrong and the regulator comes to investigate, comes to look at your organisation, at least you're going to be able to demonstrate that you have made steps to ensure that information is being secured appropriately and that these people know what they can and can't do with the information they're going to have as part of their role. 2, the second thing that you can do to kind of reduce this risk within your organisation is to ensure that you have appropriate technical controls in place. One of the easiest things that can be put in place is access controls. So depending on the nature of the systems, depending on the nature of the network structure and how information is stored within your organisation, you should be able to quite easily put in access controls so that only individuals who need to have access to certain information can gain access to that information. It's very much the same as having network drives and having segregated folders or separate folders for things like HR, finance, different departments, your marketing team, etc., etc., etc. This should be no different for people who have access to records management systems, be it a CRM, be it a patient management system. Depending on what department you work in, depending on what team you operate within, depending on what hospital you're in, for instance, if you're in a cluster of hospitals, there should be a way to define what areas that individual can have access to and what information they can see. I'm not saying you're going to fix everything by doing that. You're always going to have that kind of human element where if somebody really wants to do something or somebody really wants to get to some information, then they are potentially still going to do it, which is why we come back to training. So making sure people understand why that shouldn't happen. But having effective role-based access controls in place is one way of reducing the risk of that happening in the first place. The final thing that you should be looking at within your organisation is monitoring. So you've got role-based access control in place, you've got your training in place, you are running effective awareness campaigns, but are you monitoring how effective those things are? Do you have any kind of audit procedures in place? Can you run logs to see who has accessed the systems? Can you see who has accessed those records, those patient records? Should they have been in there? Can you run checks on it? Now, it's not clear from the article that I've seen about this particular individual whether or not they were caught because somebody informed, somebody let the IT team know, maybe somebody had seen them accessing records, maybe it was raised by the individuals, maybe they knew something about them that they wouldn't have known without accessing this information. But it may also have been that they found out through the logs. So having a look at who's been accessing patient records, by carrying out those audits, you can keep an eye on who's having access to information, why are they doing it, should they be in there. This is also really, really important just for general users on your systems. So having an audit of users, when did somebody leave, has all of their access been revoked, are they still able to access company systems, cloud systems, gain access to their laptops? Have they still got a swipe card, an access card? Has that been deactivated? So effective monitoring is a very, very important control when you're looking at reducing the risk of somebody accessing information inappropriately within inside your organization. The key thing here for me is that while this has obviously been reported, this article kind of talks about being an ongoing risk. It is something that has been around for a very, very, very long time. If you go and have a look on the Information Commissioner's Office website and have a look on the enforcement notices and enforcement actions on there, you will see there have been repeat occasions where this has happened and people have been prosecuted. And I think that's the other important thing to focus on in this video. A lot of people talk about enforcement action from the ICO. What do they do? How do they act? So it's good to see them going after individuals for this kind of activity. Maybe it's not publicized enough, maybe it could be talked about more, but it does happen, and I think that's a really important thing to call out. If you take nothing else away from this video today, I want you to take away the thought that there are things that you can do to improve your internal controls. You're probably never going to stop somebody that is completely determined and somebody that wants to gain access, but the sooner you can find that out, the sooner you can identify that there's been a breach, the better and the easier it is going to be to control. As always, this is a fairly succinct view on the world. There's probably a lot more that we could go into. Please do put your comments, your thoughts down below, and obviously we always read through those. If you have any questions, drop those down below as well. Please do subscribe, like the video, and we look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. Thanks so much.